The Federal Bureau of Investigation reports $3.4 billion were scammed from older Americans just last year. That's why one local organization is hoping to inform the elderly and bring those numbers down. SARCOA is hosting its Fraud Summit and is looking for more people to sign up. The program will teach seniors how they can protect themselves from scams, identity theft, and other forms of exploitation. The event is free to join, and lunch will be provided to all who attend. Deborah Hodgett with SARCOA explains why the elderly are an easy target for scammers.
Scammers and fraudsters can gain trust with a lot of older adults that are lonely and eventually find their way into their bank accounts or personal information. So we think it's really important to teach people on how to avoid this in the first place, to avoid identity theft or theft of their finances.
The summit will be on June 27th at the Enterprise Civic Center. People must be signed up by Friday, June 14th. So go ahead and put both of those dates in your calendar. Information on how to sign up can be found on our website. That's WTVY.com.